Welcome back, coaches. This is the Football Coaching Podcast. I am Daniel Chamberlain, co-host, here with Joe Daniel as always.
What's up, Coach?
Coach, it's a happy podcast. We're both still in the playoffs.
Still playing.
Going to round two. And this is a great place to segue into our guest for the night because Coach Ransom is in the third round of the playoffs where he's at. What state are you in, Coach? Alabama, that's right. I work with a guy that's over there in Alabama somewhere. Pike Road, I believe. Is that anywhere around you?
Yeah, that's down below Montgomery.
Gotcha.
From where I live, it's about an hour and a half.
Gotcha. Well, Coach, being a new guest on the show, we'd love to have you introduce yourself if you don't mind. Give us the quick down and dirty. Who is Jim Ransom and kind of what got you to where you are today?
Well, I'm a lawyer by trade, and I work. That's my day job. But in 2008, I took an interest in coaching. I'm an Auburn fan, and I took an interest in Tony Franklin when he got to Auburn. And somehow or another, we got to communicating, and when he got fired in that first season, he was nice enough to send me his DVD pack from the 2008, Tony Franklin system for free, and thanked me for being supportive and a good fan. And shortly after that, I started looking for volunteer jobs, and I started in middle school, and then did a year of youth football, and then I took a job, and I say job, a volunteer position in the private school at a place called Restoration Academy, and started there as offensive line coach, and we were terrible. I think in our third game of my first season there, we threw like 5 interceptions. And luckily, the offensive coordinator and I kind of spoke the same language. I had studied the double wing and the Hugh Wyatt, and we said, "Hey, coach," to the head coach, I think maybe we should try to change and go to this. And so we went from spread in week 3 to true Wyatt double wing. And over the course of that season, we morphed it into a shotgun double wing, and we won the state championship the following year.
Listen, we've had guests that have gotten film from people in scrimmage that are double wing, and they go into week 1 and they're the spread. But I can't imagine getting game film from week 2 and 3 of the spread, and then you come out in double wing. That's amazing.
It was a shock. Now on that team, we dressed 25 kids. I had one of my offensive linemen went to the NFL and started 4 years at Mississippi State. Another one went to Ole Miss, and another kid started at quarterback for 3 years at Alabama State. So we had a little talent.
Out of 25, that's a heck of a ratio.
No doubt.
That's more than I've had my entire coaching career.
We had other kids that we had other kids that couldn't qualify that would have played Division I ball.
Well, there's a lot of those, yeah. There's a lot more of those than people think.
Yeah. So and so then I I took another job closer to where I was working, and the coach there is where I really started learning defense. I went to the defensive side of the ball, and we ran the 3-3, and I coached the defensive line, and that's where I cut my teeth on that. And I also took an interest in say, hey, I was working for the state, so my head coach said, "Are you interested in doing this full time?" And I did everything to try to get to be a teacher and a coach, and wound up taking a job at a 7A school, and which I knew when I walked out on the field the first day that I'd made a mistake, football wise. We went 0-10 that year and got fired. I quit my teaching job mid-year and went back to lawyering, and that's where I've been ever since. Now that team is Thompson High School. They've since won, I think, 4 state championships.
You laid a good foundation.
Put them on a path, yeah.
They're in the same region as Hoover, where I'm sure you've heard of Hoover.
Yep.
Hoover High School. So they're a major rival of Hoover. And since then, I've just kind of volunteer coached where work would allow me. My head coach that got me into the 3-3 went to middle school ball, and I did that for 3 years. And then I went back and did 6A defensive line, and then I didn't coach for a couple of years. And I took the job that I'm in before last season. I sent an email to the head coach. I'd always ridden through this town and seen the football field and the little school on my way to work, and the little sign at the beginning of town that shows they won state championships in 2014, 15, and 16. And I said, I'm going to coach there one day. And so now I am. I sent him an email, and he asked me if I could handle the defensive line. And I said, yeah. And my boss lets me do that. And when I talked to the defensive coordinator, I said, what are we doing on defense? He said, go on YouTube and look at Joe Daniel football videos. And I said, yes, I'm already looking at those.
Look at that.
We're going to run the
Perfect.
3-3. And I said, okay. And then from there, I became a client of the Joe Daniel football. And here we are. And we're running. Now, I'll say we have some fundamental differences on how we run the defense, but I run the front. And I call the front stunts, blitzes, and he calls the back end, and we're pretty good.
That's
I'm
awesome.
happy, and it's a lot of fun this year. It's a good school. It's a little country community, and the kids are good, and the support is good. I'm having a lot of fun doing what I'm doing.
Well, we're sure glad to have you on, Coach, and I know we've been kind of going back and forth about dogs and training dogs and football and everything else. But I'm glad to have you on, and I think kind of right. I even ordered the book you recommended, so we'll see. The topic we're going to cover tonight is exactly what does a successful program look like. I'll learn how to talk here in a minute without stuttering or whatever. Because you've obviously seen the good, the bad, and in multiple programs, and none of them you had to be like the guy, right? So you could just see from the outside looking in. So I'm super excited to kind of hear your views on that. And of course, Joe has been from undefeated season to 0-10. Like you guys have both been top to bottom.
Never had an undefeated season.
Never had an undefeated, but pretty darn good. And I've been in 500 football teams my whole career. It feels like so. I can find out what the mediocre teams look like. But I am truly excited to hear your views and Joe's views on this, and then what I really have seen from the success I've seen in my area. So let's pay the bills real quick, and then we'll just jump into this conversation.
Yeah, you can check out, we've got a new football coaching guide that is a free download that you can get at joedanielfootball.com/system. It is the guide to building your ultimate defensive coaching system. And it's going to go through the keys to building that system, to putting together that system for your season, for your upcoming season. You can apply it to adapting your existing system, or you can, if you're installing something new or looking for something new. It just goes through the things to look for. What is a coaching system? What types of things need to be within your defensive system? What to look at when installing? How to plan the install of your defensive system? And then the 5 key mistakes that you need to avoid, which are probably some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight about the bad programs. Probably are those mistakes to avoid. Again, you can get that free guide by going to joedanielfootball.com/system.
Awesome. I'm going to talk about athletic speed movement. The time has come. All of our seasons are done by the time this comes out. We are maybe we play tomorrow for the state championship in Oklahoma, or we don't. We'll assume that you guys are probably, even if you're state champions, you're done with your seasons by now, or maybe have one more game. Oh no, we're only on a week overlay now. Hey, just kidding. So we're in the semis.
It won't be over. We'll have
we got one more game.
I'm not sure.
But like 90% of schools are done.
State championship will have you'll be like the semi.
Yes,
yeah.
That's right.
Most people will be done.
Yeah. But now is the time.
We have 3 weeks left if we go to the championship.
There we go. Yeah, we have 3 more games. Friday. This being a Tuesday night, we play Friday. We would have 2 more after that.
We would have 3 more after that.
There you go.
Friday, we would have 3 more. Yeah, because 5 rounds. Yeah.
But now is the time to get yourself ready, get your staff ready to get, kind of hit the ground running in January when you get everybody back that isn't going to go play basketball or wrestle or whatever other things the kids do, which they need to do. Number 1, push them out the door. Let them go be multi-sport athletes. But the ones that decide to stay back, it's time to put your speed program together and be faster for next year. And athletic speed and movement is the way to do that. As Del Basquet's 47 or 6 or however many years, I need to go do the math, but he's got a whole bunch of years of coaching speed, and not he's not a track coach. He was a little bit of a football coach, but he's a speed coach, and he was the very first speed coach in the NFL up with the Seattle Seahawks. Googling, look up his resume. The guy has now taught thousands and thousands of kids. There's a ton of success stories over at athleticspeedmovement.com. You can find the guys that he has trained from high school on up that broke every ceiling they were never supposed to reach. Kid that was a walk-on at college that got a scholarship. He walked on the NFL and got some playing time. Like, there's stories out there of all these kids because of Dell's system pushed them beyond their ceiling. You can do that for all the kids in your team, athleticspeedmovement.com. And going to talk about Patreon, patreon.com/Chamberlain Football Consulting. It's where you can find me and let me help you become a better coach, or your other coaches, or the program, or whatever you need with the little questions. X's and O's, I'll still refer you to joedanielfootball.com. All right, bills paid. Let's do this. Question 1. And you're the visitor, so we're going to let you talk first here. So you said on your first day on the football field, you knew you'd made a mistake. So you saw something that looked different. So my question to you is, what are the keys to a successful program? What does that look like? What do you see that says this can be the team that wins a state championship, or that wins 70% of its games, or whatever success looks like in that area?
Well, so a little background, I guess. I played my high school ball in the 80s at a place called Vestavia, which is our chief rival is Hoover High School. The coach that I played for coached there from 1978 until 2018. He won 300 and something games. I think he's fourth or fifth on the list in Alabama's winningest coaches. So I've got that to feed off of. He won a lot of football games, and I couldn't put my finger on it when I went to Thompson High School what I felt or saw. I just knew from my football experience that what I was seeing on the field, player wise, I knew it's 7A ball. I didn't see a football player on the field. They were undisciplined. The coaches seemed unorganized. The head coach was a nice guy. We're friends still to this day, but the staff was in disarray, and the community, which is where I live now, didn't seem to support the school that well. But since that time, they invested in a head coach that has a proven track record. They built a brand new school with this giant campus, great facilities, and they've invested in the program, and they're winning state championships. They beat the number 1 team in the state Friday night, and they won last year. They got players, that they've got support, and I can't put my finger. I just knew I just knew I'd made a horrible mistake with that job when I did it, and I think you got to trust your gut on stuff like that. And if you go visit somewhere and you don't feel good about it, you need to trust your gut, because I didn't. I trusted mine, but I went ahead anyway because I wanted to coach 7A ball.
Right.
And it was an 0-10 season, and it was absolutely miserable because I was teaching, had no experience teaching, so I was in my classroom drawing up play cards, at 5:30 every morning, and then doing lessons and all that kind of stuff. And it was the worst football season of my entire life. Nothing about it was fun. And then I went and rejoined the middle school, which was a feeder school to Hoover High School. And they had long since been established as a power program, and that bled down to the feeder programs in the middle schools. And we had players, the coaches were organized, and now we didn't run their system, but we kind of did. Everybody ran spread. I tell my head coach now and my defensive coordinator, I saw more sophisticated offenses in middle school in the Hoover program than I see in 1A football. My first year, my quarterback for that middle school is Robbie. He's the backup quarterback at South Carolina right now. So I mean, we had players, and I knew what their programs looked like, and the community support and a coaching staff that knows how to organize and keep the tempo up in season, off season, and recruit the halls and get kids interested in playing and keep everybody motivated. That's the best way I can put it.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense.
And I've seen both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. A lot of that, for sure, the two things that jump out as far as like disorganization, I think, is a big one. And different coaches work in different ways, and there's different organization, but there has to be organization. There's and maybe their practices weren't like this, at some point, but Jim Woodson, who coaches at Powhatan, not coaches, doesn't coach him, retired, but was at Powhatan High School here and had a ton of success for years. We were running a similar system, and our coaches, when we were struggling, this was when I was at a very unsuccessful program, but we were working our butts off as coaches in that situation. We were hyper organized, maybe too organized. But some of the other coaches went up to their practice, and they would run a play. And that, to me, this would be disorganization, but it was what they did. They would run a play, and then they would correct. And like there wasn't like indies, it wasn't like anything else. It was like run a play, correct, run it, correct the problems, run it again, correct the problems, run it again, correct the problem. And that was the organization. The organization was, we are going to get this play freaking right today. And
Right.
whereas to me, the organization, it looks more like and late in the season, our practices look more and more like that, right? Our practices now are a very short indie period, and then it's getting out and it's running team and it's correcting things on team. A lot of times at this point in the season, it's, we're in the second round of the playoffs. We have some injuries, so it's running the play. 10 of the guys have run it 10,000 times. One of the guys has run it 8 times, and so we're running it as much for him as we are for everyone else, and it's correcting him. And then we're finally at a point where we can drill down a little bit on the details. But to me, generally, the organization is the practice plan, and we move from here to here to here to here to here, and it's structured. We know what we're doing. The practices have focus. You don't see a lot of clinics on the field. You don't see guys trying to draw stuff up and figure it out on the field. That happens where we go over it. But I think the organization is a big one. The community support is funny. I came in to the program that we're at now. I knew what I was coming into when I came into this program because I've played against them for 12 years before, and they're the smallest team, but a lot of times they also seemed like you just didn't know. And I've known some of the coaches there, and I think they're good football coaches, but maybe they just didn't have any staff around them. They looked disorganized. You wondered like who's coaching these guys. But the biggest thing that I noticed when we got here, I mean, the players, the biggest wall for the players when we got here was it was the fourth coach in 4 years or 5 years or something like that. And so everyone has their own style of organization. Everyone has their own style of discipline. Every style of organization and every style of discipline takes a few years to get it established. And so none of it had been established. Just the next guy trying to put in his way and going through the fight to get his way in, and the next guy trying to get his way, and the other guys are wrong, and I'll show you. And so our kids just didn't have any football intelligence. I mean, they'd been through the COVID year stuff and everything where that got shortened, and they hadn't been in the weight room, and there's just a lot of stuff. But the biggest thing was like there was a feeling, kind of like you say, there was a feeling of just like, oh boy, this is. We didn't really have any players, and the couple of good athletes that we had a couple of good athletes, but they hadn't done anything really. There was a couple of good athletes who were undisciplined. There were some nice kids. There were a lot of nice kids. I mean, that was one of them was just like, it was a general feeling. But another one was, and I just remember this, and in fact, I wrote an email about it a couple weeks ago. The team that we played this past Friday, we won the first home play. Was our first home playoff game we've ever hosted. we won a playoff game for the first time in school history Friday. 4 years ago, our very first game in the program was against the exact same team. We had a competitive game. It was like 16-13 or something like that was the score. It was the very first game for me and my head coach in this program. And after the game, we are distraught because it's a game that we should have won. You don't ever come out of a 16-13 game and feel good about it. You know, we're going like all our heads are doing is going over every little thing that we did wrong. And it's interesting because I've been in places where we weren't very good and we didn't have very good players, and the fans were like, I've made this comparison before. The fans were like the fans of the SEC school that has no business competing for a national title, but their fans think they should every year. Look at you, Mississippi State.
You right now?
And I'm like, well, no, you're the new ones. I'm talking about the traditional Mississippi. Yeah, well, Auburn at least has a couple. Mississippi State, you know, their fans are screaming and hollering, pissed off, and it's like, you're Mississippi State. You know, it's not nothing wrong with it, but you know, be happy that you're not. Don't be happy this year, but A&M a lot of times would be one. But you know, no offense, A&M, but you know, I've been at those places. But this fan base here, this community here, there weren't many people at the game, and the ones that were there were just so happy that we were competitive. They thanked us, and they golf clapped when we made plays, and and one of the things that this program was missing was there was no expectation, and that's death. Because if being 1-9 is okay, that's hard.
Yeah,
that's what you have to fight. Now we have expectations, and our fans are brutal, and you know now they're Mississippi State fans, but. You know, that's better than them just being, you know, Vandy fans. Like, Vandy fans probably pretty happy right now. But
yeah, no, they knocked off the monster.
Yeah,
they started it. They broke Alabama.
Yeah. No, might be touching on something there. But, yeah, like our fans now are there's expectations. There's pressure. And I'll add one more because I've been at schools that had great athletes and the administration wasn't supportive. And that was a killer, too. At the end of our game on Friday, one of the assistant principals, basketball coach, came out. You know, I saw him on the way out, and he grew up here. He went to school here. He's an administrator here now. He's a coach here now, and he said, "I just want to let you know, like, how much this means to us, how much it means to the community. Thank you so much. You know, you and your staff." Told Coach Keeler, told everybody. And, you know, thank you so much. And it didn't cross my mind at the time, but I know that. You know, one of the things that obviously when you're a program like that, you worry about the head coach leaving and stuff because he's had some success there and, you know, maybe padding his resume. But like, this is the most supportive. Like I would, you know, go back and tell them this is the most supportive administration. And probably the only reason that we were able to have the success so far that we've had is the administration allowing us to do those things. Because if you're in a program, 2 examples, I was in one program where the administration never ever backed the coach up and would schedule parent meetings with the like superintendent, the school board, the head coach, and an upset parent, and would schedule those during practice so that the head coach couldn't be at practice to deal with these things. That's an unsupportive administration. I also dealt with an administration. I mean, in the same another administration, just. You know, I had to deal with this administration that I worked under. I liked them very, like you said, you talked about the head coach that you're still friends with, but it was disorganized practices. This isn't personal, right? This is, I worked with people that I really, really liked that were the administrators, but they were on a different planet than I was as far as what it took, what we needed. Now they, you know, and their view was, well, we gave you some money. I'm like, I don't need money. We'd go out there and look like trash. We bought you $6,000 worth of uniforms. Don't care. Didn't want them, didn't ask for them. You said they were in the budget, and if I didn't spend it, it was gone. Don't need it. Need support. Need to not have a 2-hour meeting because I beat a team too bad and they were upset. Like, that's not a supportive administration.
That's tough.
That's the kind of stuff that so community being apathetic is probably the worst thing to me, that they just didn't care about winning, because that's going to trickle down to the players.
Right.
Just like being in the middle school program at Hoover, that trickles down to the middle school. Like the apathy, the non-caring, guess where that goes? Straight down to the middle school, to the youth programs, to all of it. And it's hard as hell to break it and to get out of it. The lack of support from administration, the apathy of community. It's not the lack of players. Because we'll talk about, I think we're going to get to it in a minute, so I don't want to jump on it because of the things that it takes, because it's not players. Like, it's really not. It makes it easier. It makes it easier to have coaches. But the organization, I think, too, those are the things that I've seen that like, I know the question was what makes a successful program. We went the total opposite direction, but
No, that's okay, because sometimes that's what you learn is what not to be, right? Like that's part of experiencing those things. Go ahead, Jib. You looked like you had something to say there to add.
And I would say too, at a place like Hoover or Thompson, if you have that apathy and non-support all the way down through a huge program like that, it takes forever to turn it around, right? I mean, because at Hoover, there's 2 middle schools that feed 2 totally separate campuses, 2 totally separate football teams, and if you get a disease in that program and it filters down that far, you got a problem that's going to take years to fix. In a program like I'm at now, the head coach can turn it around in a year.
it's interesting because I guess everybody's different with their middle school programs. Our middle school program in Virginia because we're a small. I mean, we're a small community. There's one middle school, one high school, so that's it. But I grew up in Georgia, and I went to a middle school that fed into the high school that I went to, which was Pope High School in Marietta, and then fed into Walton. At the time, Pope and Walton, I don't know what it's like now. I've been back forever, but Pope and Walton were rivals. That was our rival. And I know now that in recent years, Walton's been nationally ranked, and Pope was not very good, so I can't imagine that it was a great rivalry. But we always played – I played for Pope's middle school team. So we didn't have, Dodge and middle school team where the middle school then split off. So those big schools will play middle school ball together and then go play at separate high schools. That's how it works there. Wow.
Well, so ours, the Hoover team is fed by 2 middle schools.
Right.
So those 2 middle schools are actually rivals, right? So.
Oh, but they all go to Hoover. Is that okay? They all go, so they all end up. I got you. Okay. Yeah. Not what I thought. Yeah.
So there's 2 middle schools. There's 2 middle schools that feed 1 high school.
Gotcha.
And all the kids that go to both of those middle schools are going to go to Hoover High School.
Gotcha.
And it's so.
I can't imagine.
If Hoover starts having a problem,
yeah.
It filters down that far. You got a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but like this program that I'm in now, like you said, expectations. Well, they won 3 championships. 10, 9, and 8 years ago. There's expectations. They getting to the first round of the playoffs don't mean anything. Getting to the 3rd round is pretty much what's expected.
Yeah.
And if we have a player and a little luck, they want you to compete for what we call a blue map, the trophy. But I wouldn't say that it's like, if you don't, you're a failure. They're supported, but there are expectations, and this is a perennially good 1A program.
Have you've coached some middle school, and I'm trying to, I don't pay as much attention to the other middle school programs around here, but based off of that logic, it seems like, and this is what we did here, the start of the rebuild is not with your seniors and your juniors. If you have a broken program, you can't fix it by starting in the 9th grade. To me, you can't fix that program by starting in the 9th grade. And I work with so many middle school coaches who tell me, like, yeah, I don't have any communication with our high school program. I'm like, I just can't even fathom it. Just leaving that up to, somebody you don't even know, because it like you said, it trickles down. Well, by the same token, if you fix everything at the top, but you don't fix the bottom, the next year you're like starting over. I guess
right
you can establish you can establish something that makes it easier, but it feels like you've got to, obviously you got to fix it at the top, but you've got to establish something at the bottom so that feeder program is getting, at the very least, in because those 6th, 7th, 8th graders are a lot easier to fix than those 11th and 12th graders. So at the very least, in 3 years, you'll have some kids coming in the program who are what you're looking for.
I think success
Yeah.
success where I've kind of been has been really the number one thing is just the experience of the coaches. So if you're going out to get your first head coach job and you don't have some experienced guys to bring with you, the odds are not in your favor. But having experienced coaches hasn't always equaled success either, right? So it's not like a guarantee. Oh, I went and got a 20-year guy to be my DC. Well, that doesn't matter. This year was on the outside looking in of a program that brought in like a 25 or 26-year DC with state championship runs. I don't know that he ever won one. And the kids don't speak his lingo. The coaches don't speak his lingo. It's a non-fit because he's too advanced and can't simplify. And then I've been on a team that had a first-year head coach and no one on staff really had any experience, and watched that kind of burn. So there's no real true testament there to saying, oh, experience wins, but I don't know that you can do it without it either. So I think it's one of those.
There's different kinds of there's a guy who has 20 years of experience, and whether he's in a position, whether it's somebody who had experience as a defensive coordinator but he shouldn't be a head coach, or like you said, he's just not speaking the same language and not adjusting, not adapting, doesn't know what he doesn't know type of thing. Maybe he's always had talent and now he's stepping into a situation where he doesn't. Maybe he's never had talent, but maybe he's coming from, like Jim talked about, maybe he's coming from 1A to 7A and he's never seen an offense like that. Or maybe he's coming from 7A to 1A and he's never had to figure out how to get 22 kids to be a good football team. He's used to having 160 or whatever. So, there's different scenarios. There's always different scenarios there. But also your inexperienced coaches, that's what we see in youth. That's what I work with in youth every single year, is kind of like what Jim's talking about in 1A, and I saw it in 2A in Virginia, is you've got some teams that you're like, it looks like they've never been coached. And it's because you've got guys who are either don't know what they don't know, or they're caught up in their ego and think they know more than they do, or they're disorganized, or they signed up for the job, but they didn't know what it really took, and they're not really taking it seriously. You've got guys who aren't doing what it takes. And you can have a first-year coach who, I'll volunteer my own self, who just, because I have coaches who do it, who just buy in 100% to a mentor, to JDFB or whatever it may be, and go 100% on it. And they're coaching against guys with way more experience, but they're doing it with thought, with purpose, with organization, they're learning the details. They know what they don't know. They're figuring out as they go. So the study that we always cite when we do Football Coaching 101, which is coming out this week, or it's probably open as this comes out on Thanksgiving. The study that we always cite in that, when we promote that, is a study actually done at the University of Alabama, the only school that would pay for studies about football. They did a study where they said, where they found that the correlation between success, winning games being the measure of success, the most important factor in almost every other sport, particularly individual sports, but almost every other sport, the highly correlative factor was success as a player equaled success as a coach. So I get a high level tennis player, they're a good tennis coach. Football success has almost nothing to do with success as a player, very little compared to other sports. And it's the only sport where the highest correlation to success was years of experience. The more you've done it, the better you're going to be. So that's always going to be the case. More success is better. More experience is better. But then the second factor of that was not just years on the sideline. The second factor of that was number of years of experience you have had with successful coaches.
Right.
So then they looked at, okay, essentially what's your coaching tree? And if you have 5 years and a great coaching tree, or, you know, great people around you, great mentors, you flatten out that learning curve compared to somebody with, say, 10 years of experience who's been just figuring it out on their own, hasn't really been mentored by anybody, et cetera, et cetera. And so experience is the highest indicator, but the second highest is your mentorships and the people that you're around and the people you learn from.
Yeah, I can see that 100% because I'm in my 5th year and I've been with, weirdly enough, 6 different staffs because of moving on preseason, right? Yes, I'm on 2 hands. 2 hand staffs, 1 hand in years. But I can see if I were stuck under some of those coaches, I would have never learned anything if I didn't reach out and do something like Joe Daniel football. I would have done it their way only. And some of them I know it wouldn't have been successful because I've seen their records over those same 5 years, right? And there's some that if I'd have got stuck with Bill Blankenship for my 5 years, my pedigree would have been very rich. That would have been he would have taught me everything I needed to know at 5 years. You know what I mean? He would have that's a vast amount of successful experience to pull from. So, yeah, I can see that. I think the other one is the buy-in. I know you guys kind of talked about that community or really the administration, but community too. If parents are bought in because the community says, yes, football is important, then players are always there. If you have 0 hour, no one's ever missing, right? We're watching right now. We actually shared a thing in our coaches text just the other day about a very successful program in our league has got like a 6:15 weightlifting session, right? And it doesn't matter. It's playoffs. They're obviously still going. And there's no complaints. No one whines. But if you go to a culture or a school with no culture that doesn't understand what success takes, getting parents to bring a kid before the 8 o'clock bell to go to school is going to be like pulling teeth. Well, coach, that's not necessary. Well, you don't know that it's not necessary, right? You've obviously never seen it, but that would be very, very tough. So I think that community and administration, the whole thing, the whole shebang has got to be all bought in. And I don't know if you can do it with one of them missing. Yeah, I don't know.
There was a strength coach at Parkview High School. This is probably 2008. I saw it at Glazier Clinic. And Parkview's in Atlanta. And that's where Jeff Rancour went and Brian McCann. It's a pretty successful baseball school, but I played against them in high school one time. It was a really weird game. The story was that Rancour was also being recruited as a quarterback. He was the number 1 quarterback, and he was being recruited to go to Clemson. He ended up playing baseball and going to the Braves and the Mets and whatever, but he's a Braves announcer now for those who care. But the story was that Rancour, they had a weightlifting period. So they had, weights period in school every day. So they lifted as part of their, as part of school. And in fact, they had a class. Every sport had their class. And the story was that the strength coach told was that Rancour, on the day of the state championship baseball game, it was on their programming, because I think he was still in the football lifting, was the power clean max day or whatever. And Rancour, they're like, you don't have, you got a baseball championship game today. And it was like, this is the day. And this is not this is the quarterback, right? This is not the offensive lineman. This is just, they could be a pretty boy. And he's the star. He's the stud. And it's the day. He power cleaned 315, and I think they played a doubleheader for the state championship, and I think he pitched a shutout and hit 4 home runs. And that day. And it's like, now obviously he was an exceptional athlete, but that's the culture that was established there.
Yeah, and he might have been early in the science, because all the science says now you should lift on game day, right? That central nervous system priming is a real deal.
Very hard to convince to get through that with people.
Absolutely. Yep. It's hard to follow the new science sometimes. Yep. Let's jump into question 2 here, and it's right off the same thing, but if we're in a program now, regardless of where we're at, or maybe we're taking over a new program in this coming spring, how can we take what we have and mold that to be a successful program? So what does that trail to success look like? Is it just scheme change? Like Coach Ransom said in his opening talk there, just get back to what your kids can do? What are all the pieces to shaping or molding a program from where it is to being that perennial powerhouse? Joe, we'll let you go first here. Jim, open the last one up.
Okay, I was actually just having this thought because, like, as we were talking about before we came on the air, playing teams, the difference between playing teams that have a guy versus playing teams that have, the team that we're playing here on Friday has 11 5'10", 5'11", 190, 195-pound, good-looking athletes. They're disciplined. Like they have a thing, they do it well, they do it the same. They're in the weight room, like all of this stuff. And I was actually talking to my head coach about this. The formula is not hard, and a lot of people think that the formula is like, the formula is it's hard, but it's not hard to figure out. Get them in the weight room, consistently, do the right things in the weight room that get them more explosive, stronger, injury prevention so they stay on the field, etc. But you got to get them there. Then you've got to establish your rules. You've got to establish your organization. What's a practice look like? What time do we show up? What are the consequences of not being there when that happens? You establish that. What does our offense look like? How do we line up? What does the formation look like? How far off the ball are we? What are our splits? Do we enforce those things? Little things that get overlooked very, very easily, especially when you don't have the coaching staff. You got two coaches and they're out there just trying to get it done. Maybe you got another couple guys, but they're really just bus riders, and you're just spinning. It's really hard then. But the formula is, get everybody standing. If they're supposed to stand on a line, they're standing on a line. If their helmet's supposed to be on, their helmet's on. If they're supposed to sprint, they sprint. If they're supposed to jog, they jog. If they're supposed to be in a three-point stance with balanced feet and 60-40 weight distribution, they're in a three-point stance with balanced feet, 60-40 weight distribution. And we don't accept a 57-43 weight distribution. It's 60-40.
That's some quick math, by the way.
Yeah, it was. But I can honestly say that I am often overwhelmed, and it takes, like, I can say that the last 2 weeks of this year has been the first time that I've been able to lock in on those types of details, because we just weren't there. And it's like, if you can get that, and it takes more than a year. Now, if you've got some great players, or if you come into something that's already established. When I was the head coach at Amelia for 1 year, it was already established. That was the easiest year of my life on the field. As I said, right. I had problems with other things, but on the field, if we were supposed to be on a line, we were on a line. We were supposed to be on time, we were on time. We were supposed to sit and pay attention, we sat and paid attention. We were supposed to be in the weight room, we were in the weight room. I didn't have those problems. I had one or two kids, but that was it. And so that was established. That was the 4th year in the program. My first year as a head coach, but I'd been there for 3, and my head coach the year before I got there. So it was established what to do. The way to get it done is to be very detail oriented in what you want to see, and then make sure that it is what you're seeing. It goes back to, I probably bring up every episode. It goes back to Lynn Shackelford talking about 70% of the scores came off of misalignments. Well, everybody can can align right.
Right.
It's detail. That's attention to detail. That's never, ever letting a snap go in practice without seeing that he's 4x4 instead of 5x5. And get, like, that's critical. And the more that we hammer those details, it takes a lot of work. And if you want to do it the way that I want to do it, which is not 4-hour practices, it's not, getting out on the field every single day during the off season. We don't have a football class. We don't have all of those things. Our kids play 3 sports. You have to be, if you're going to have a 2-hour practice, or it's a 90-minute practice, or whatever you're going to have, you as a coach have got to know exactly what you want to see, and you've got to be 100% locked in to see that. And the last thing about that is, you can't see all that your first year. It's really hard. You got to also decide what you want to see, because if you're a first-year coach, second-year coach, you got to decide what you have to see. What are the non-negotiables? And then as you go, if you run a system, and if you don't switch systems every year, if you switch systems every year, it gets harder and harder, because you got to learn all new things to look for. But as you go along, you start to be, things. If you walk into your kitchen that you've lived in for 30 years and everything's been in the same place for 30 years, you're going to notice if a drawer was left open. You're going to notice if somebody moved the toaster 3 feet to the left. But if your kitchen is a wreck and it's a brand new kitchen, you're not going to notice that stuff.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point for every level of coach. I'm in my 5th year. I'm still seeing things like, how the hell did I not know that last year or 2 years ago? Right? Like, there's still so much stuff you learn every single year, and it feels like, how are you ever supposed to be good at this job when every year you look back and go, I was so stupid last year. Like, I had no idea what I was doing.
Anybody who ever played college football, if you're a high school player and you played both ways or whatever, or you just kind of got through, and then you go to play college football and you've got coaches who all that they do is coach football, and you're doing football for 24 hours a day for the first few weeks, and everybody I know who's ever played college football is like, at the end of the first 2 weeks of camp their freshman year, is like, oh my god, the game is just like, all of a sudden, like, you feel like you could go back to high school and just murder people.
Yeah.
Because you have coaches who are just locked in on this thing and are coaching the details, and you're like, I never saw that before.
Jim, we'll bring you in here now, boss. What we look at molding a program, what are some of the things that you've seen that were used? Because I mean, you've been around the block. What did it look like to mold a
Yeah,
team?
but as a volunteer coach, most of the time I wasn't in the day to day operation of the school and all that kind of stuff. But the most I learned was the year after we won the state championship at the private school I was at. I moved on to another school, which was a 4A school, mid level, good, decent program. And then left to take another job. Didn't even coach a season there, and they got another coach in, and I asked him if he needed help, and he did, and he's the guy that left there and went to the middle school in Hoover. So I coached under him for 4 years. He was the head coach at the high school where we were, and he demanded the details be right. Everything. We didn't play fast like NASCAR fast, but our practice, we moved from one session to another. We ran plays, and we ran team offense, and then we ran and we did special teams, and then we ran and we did defense. And he coached the offensive line. He let me coach the defensive line. I was kind of shocked he trusted me to do that, but he told me what he wanted, and I did it. And we were running the 3-3, but he demanded those details, demanded them, and he did stuff that I would on the field in practice that I would like. I'd go, you can't do that now, coach. He made it work, and he never got in trouble. But it wasn't my way of coaching. But I mean, he did some hard coaching, and sometimes when we would screw up so bad, and he coached the coaches hard too. If I screwed up, I mean, I heard about it just like I was a kid, right? And he demanded it every play, every snap. And I would see him get so mad at a lackadaisical practice, he would just blow the whistle and he'd say, "Y'all go home." And we'd have a big game that way. The kids would be, "No, coach, we got to practice." He'd say, "You better get out of here now." I mean, he was serious. He was just like vibrating. He was so mad. But he demanded those details. And that year, we went 10-2 and went to the second round of the playoffs, and that was overachieving for that year. And I learned more about coaching under him, not just the X's and O's, but how to coach and take from him, because he made a successful program. And now when he went to the middle school, he was just a defensive coordinator. And he let me come in there. He asked me to come. He said, if you got time, can you come coach? And I said, yeah. He said, I'm going to let you coach the front. You just handle the line and the linebackers. He said, we can run a 4-2 or a 3-3. You know, it's all the same thing. And I said, yeah. You know, he taught me how we slant to a four-man front. And the one thing I didn't learn under him, because he ran the back end, was how the front and the back end marry up and run support. And that's where JDFB got me the final piece of the puzzle. Because when I started coaching, I wanted to be an offensive genius like everybody else.
Yeah.
Defensive genius. And I'm having fun. I'm loving it. And I'm coaching the hell out of our kids. And I'm running the front end, the line and the linebackers off of JDFB. That's what I'm doing. And my defensive coordinator likes to do things that sound cool, and we have all these back end, these coverages that we don't need because nobody can throw the ball. I mean, nobody can throw the ball. I mean, we play teams that can't complete 50% against air.
Yep, right.
And so our final game of the season this last year, I'm kind of a thorn in his side, I think, because I'm a volunteer coach. What are they going to do? Fire me? I mean, we were beating, our final game was, we'd already won the region, undefeated in the region, and we're playing a 3A team, and we're beating them. And they're a playoff 3A team. And all of a sudden, we have a pass play. They throw a pass, and it looks like the first man out to practice. And I look at my strong safety, and he's just standing there looking like, that guy's running down the field. Nobody's covered him. Maybe I should go get him. And the head coach said on the thing, what coverage were we in? And he couldn't really tell him what we were doing. And I just walked up to the head coach, and I took my microphone off, and I said, we need to be in cover 3 every snap. Every snap. Right? Every snap. And that's what we're doing now. He made him do it. My defensive coordinator, he said him at halftime, and my defensive coordinator sulked out of the meeting at halftime like he had his toys taken away from him. They had to win that game on a final second pass. And, you know, that's when I realized, hey, we were a pretty good football team. And the coach made him, since that final game, in the first 2 playoff games, we run cover 3 every snap. And we understand how to drop and keep things in front of us. We understand force on the edge. And I was able to put all that together through this. And you can see all my books and stuff, I got all the books and videos. And the thing that always frustrated me about defense is I would buy defensive DVD, and it would be about drawing up blitzes and fronts.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they want you to do.
I can look at the front and figure out how to get guys in all the gaps. I need to know how the run fits work on the edge. I need to know force and how to work the back end and the alley player and JDFB was the final piece of the puzzle for me defensively.
That was always my, I talked about, I talk about the track meet game. My first year as a defensive coordinator, and we were running Georgia Military College 353 that I learned, you know, I'm sure if I had gone down to Dahlonega and gone to Georgia Military's camps, clinics that they had, I would have learned a lot better. But I got the DVDs off of Championship Productions at the time years ago, and the VHSs because they were having a VHS clearance sale and I was broke. And I had all the blitzes. I had 100 blitzes, 172 blitz combinations, stunt combinations. But there was nothing about run fits. There was not true run fits. There was filling the gaps, but there was nothing about squeezing and spilling and forcing and alley and all that sort of stuff. And that's like the biggest key, because like you said, I can draw stuff up.
Right.
Like that's not hard. It's like passing routes. It's like I can draw routes up.
Yeah.
but concepts are concepts. And there's however many you can debate 7 or 13 concepts in football essentially. And but the reality is as far as passing concepts, there's horizontal stretches underneath, there's horizontal stretches, deep horizontal stretches, there's vertical stretches, and there's object receiver routes. That's Bill Mountjoy. That's it. That's it. Period. Everything falls into those categories. You got a horizontal stretch underneath, you got a horizontal stretch down the field, you've got a vertical stretch, and you've got object receivers. That's it. But everything falls into that. If you don't have that understanding on the offensive side, or if you don't have the run fits understanding on the defensive side, if you don't understand the blocking schemes, none of that stuff matters.
Right.
And it always frustrated me. Where I would have somebody come to me and say, like, I've got this awesome playbook for their youth team, and look at it, and they had the backfield doing this, and then they had another one where the backfield did this, and they had triple option, the backfield doing this, and they had this. But every single page had T's over top of all 5 offensive linemen. What are they doing? They just
block.
Just a T.
Block straight ahead.
Just a T, straight ahead. T.
Run the wedge.
It's like, you're going to need a blocking scheme to make this work, right? Yeah, that's in every level of football. Yeah, block somebody. That's and that's the thing is that's the one where you like that's the detail oriented, but it's usually people who don't know what they don't know. They don't know about run fits. They don't know about blocking schemes. They don't know about passing concepts. They just know cool things that look cool, or they saw it on the internet or whatever, and it doesn't really work.
When you start talking about molding, I feel like there's Joe, you taught me this very early on, and I've used it in my personal life. I've used it in football. I've used it in business. And that's, if you don't know, hire somebody.
Yeah,
that is a really good way to build a successful program. If you don't know how to run defense, go find someone who does and hire them, right? If they're available. I have no doubt that will help you get to success faster than you trying to learn a defense and mold a coach. But I still think that development of the entire room, right? You've got to develop the guys in your office, because they're just sending guys out when they don't know anything. You said it earlier, you don't know what you don't know. Send them out there to run a practice. Oh yeah, what are your indie drills for the day, right? Like they're supposed to invent indie drills, but they don't know. They don't understand breaking down a problem on film to its most molecular pieces and then fixing one molecule at a time. That doesn't come naturally to people.
One of the best things that I could recommend, the year that I coached in junior college at Ellsworth in Iowa, I have a lot of, not great things to say about some of the stuff. And we won a lot of games, so it's just personal preference, honestly. But one thing that I can recommend to everybody is and this was like the first day we got there. So I don't know anybody. All the other coaches like 23. I'm like 29. I at least had a little bit of experience. Most of the coaches were like just out of college. Me and the defensive coordinator are like, he's 28, I'm 29. Head coach is like 40 something. Everybody else is 23. We all sit in a conference room. The kids aren't there yet. We were in a conference room for the entire day. And a part of that day was every single coach, there were 10 of us, was going to present their quote unquote everyday drills, right? So you had to have, your 5 drills or whatever it was that you were going to present. And we had to stand there and teach those drills to the rest of the staff, teach what we were going to do. And, I remember my drills went largely untested because I've been coaching for 7 or 8 years by then. I had good drills. I could explain them. I knew what I was doing. But I remember some of those younger guys just having drills that they found on the internet or whatever. And our head coach, a couple of those guys were almost in tears because he's just – but he was not going to send them out there with a team that was ranked 3rd in the nation, was competing for a national championship. He was not going to send some young guy out there and just trust him to have good indie drills. He also wasn't just going to hand him a sheet that he printed off from somewhere and trust him to do it right. He wanted to hear that job. He wanted to hear that drill. How are you going to teach it? Why are you doing it this way? How are you setting it up? And like, that was probably the most worthwhile. It was only a few. I think it took a couple hours for the offense, a couple hours for the defense. But like, honestly, that is a worthwhile exercise with your coaching staff. just be brutally honest and make sure that everybody's. You'll also find out very early who's not okay with brutal honesty, and who's not okay with being questioned. But that is a very good exercise to do, because if you can't teach it to a bunch of guys who know football, how are you going to teach it to a 13-year-old?
Yeah, that's true. Kind of that old military mentality. If it takes more than 15 minutes to explain, it's too complex. Go back.
Yeah,
Which in
we do
football,
yeah,
you can do that to 5 minutes, right?
yeah. We have the 5-minute rule. If you can't install, after the initial install in a game plan week, if you can't install it in 5 minutes, if you can't install it in one period, it's too much. Don't do it.
That's right. Let's get to our last part, guys. I know we've pushed past an hour here, and I don't want to keep Coach Ransom up too late. I know me and Joe, we can talk forever. So the last one, this should go pretty quick anyway. Jim, we'll let you start here. Can any team become a successful program, or do you have to start with certain pieces? Is there a magic equation? And maybe some pieces are key and some others can kind of be wherever, but can any team become successful?
Yes, I think so. And I'll give you two good examples from opponents we had this year. One team we played in our region showed up with 14 players dressed out. 14 players. Now, we beat the snot out of them. That team was a wing T team. They ran the concepts well as they could. They wound up going 5-5 on the season and making the playoffs. Now, they just didn't have any bullets in the gun.
Right.
But
right.
They were as good as they could be with what they had. And if they had 25 players, they'd have been a good football team, and they wouldn't have had to be great football players. They had a coach that could make it work with that little bit. And then we played another team that dressed out, I think, 12 players. I mean, seriously, 12.
Living dangerously.
They couldn't do anything. It was that team. I felt sorry for them. And one of their running backs screamed at their offensive line after I think they had like negative 90 yards rushing or something against them. He screamed at his line to block, and I thought they've never been taught to block.
Yep.
They don't know how to block or who to block, and so yes. You can. Anybody can be somewhat successful, but if you don't have the bullets in the gun, there's a limit.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That Jimmy's and Joe's, not X's and O's statement rings more true every single year. And the team that I'm currently coaching with, we were 6-4 closing out the regular season, and we went on the road to a 9-1 team, and honestly, the game was never really in question. Like, we were fairly dominant from one end to the end to the other, and that's no disrespect to them, but we showed up and the team really didn't pass the eye test, right? They didn't have our offensive line. All 5 of them might have been the biggest dudes on the field. Like, there was no way they were going to stop us from doing what we wanted to do in the run game. So the record didn't matter. Like, it's just Jimmy's and Joe's still matters. They were very well coached. The coach down there has had a very successful program for a long time. Just like you said, he just didn't have the bullets this year in the gun. And we're not world beaters by any means, but you can't show up with the biggest, nastiest 5 dudes on the front of the line, and they don't have anyone to contend and expect for there to be competition. Yeah, obviously it was a football game. There was ebbs and flows and all that. It was a fun one, a very fun one to coach in, because it was never really sealed either. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how successful that program was. Jimmy's and Joe's made the difference last Friday night. So, what about you, Joe? What do you think? Can any team? Can I take over any team this next year and get them to a successful program? Or
eventually, yes. And like Jim said, success is relative. To me, success is, a successful program is essentially overachieving. A successful program is doing more with less. And so a successful program is doing things that they've never done before. A successful program is doing what people thought you couldn't get done, even if those people were very uneducated on it. It's it's and I have to believe that because, you know, again, the program we're at was one of the worst, and it can be done. In fact, people told us, I mean, many people told my head coach, do not take this job. You cannot win there. A lot of people told him, you cannot win there. Can we win a state title here? Not. Well, I don't know.
Still in it, right?
Still in it right now. Would I expect to be a state title contender? It would take a lot of shock the worlds.
Yeah.
But again, you know, first playoff win in school history. That's success. The last 2 seasons, you know, having the first winning season 2 years ago in 17 years, that's success. Having the 4 and 6 year, that was success. The first year we were 4 and 6. We finished winning 3 of the last 4. That was success because, you know, we were 1 and 6 and we're 1 and 5 or whatever, and everybody was like, well, you know, here you see, we
same
told
old, same old.
And then we go 3 and 4 to finish out, and because we kept doing the same things over and over and over again. And that was success. And they were about to build the statue then. The next year, the first winning season in 17 years. So they start carving the statue. And the next year, we have back-to-back winning seasons for the first time since 86, 87. So the statue is being built. Now they're putting plaques on the statue with, you know, first home playoff game. And then they added another plaque after the first playoff win. And so, the statue is growing. But it's like we weren't supposed to be that good. But also, it depends on how much control you have, too. Here, we have some schools who probably never would have been successful had the old districts not been broken up, essentially. And we still play the majority of our old district schedule. We're actually getting one of them back because they were a 6A, and I think they're moving down to 5A. So we'll play 5As. We're not playing 6As. But some of the schools who were in districts where it was essentially hopeless because, again, some of our districts were 3As like us playing, and some of them were even worse off. There were city schools, inner city schools that didn't have a lot of the things, you know, that even the advantages that we have. They had a hard time hiring coaches because the school doesn't pay well, and da-da-da-da-da. It's not a good place to work. It's not a fun place to work. You know, our school's a fun place to work, and it's great, pays great, and everything like that. I assume. I don't have to go in their building. But everybody says it's a great place to work. So we can get teachers, we can get coaches, all that sort of stuff. They had other schools who couldn't. And they were screwed because they had schedules with all the schools with all the advantages, and now they're able to go out and schedule. And essentially, we've got teams that in the state, and they're like the team you just talked about. We've got teams that will schedule themselves a 9-1 successful season, and then playoffs come, and you know you can't schedule your playoff opponents, but so they might win 1, they might win 2, but probably they don't win any. So, but I do, and that's what I kind of talked about before. You absolutely, the formula is not hard. The discipline, the weight room, all of that stuff. You have to be detail oriented. You have to know what you want. You have to enforce it. You have to be unrelenting in demanding those things. You have to do it smartly because you can't run off all your players because they think the head coach is a jerk. Because you got to explain to them. You got to sell your program. But every program, I would say, every program can be successful. Every coach, maybe not.
As a guy who's looking to take over a program at some point,
have fun with that.
I get the most worried about like red flag administrations, right? Like where you just know when.
And again, you can have success with a red flag administration if you're cool being miserable.
Right. A few years ago, I was at a school that was 4 wins in 5 seasons or worse. And we went something like 3-1 to open the season. And I was walking with my head coach down the hallway, and the English teacher comes out and says, "Man, y'all are doing really good. Congratulations. That's awesome. Where are you going to coach next year?" That's what she asked the head coach. And he said, "Right here. What are you talking about?" She said, "No, you won't." What? She said, you won't be here next year. The good ones always get ran off. So where are you going to coach football next year? And it's like, and sure enough, they found a way. And like you said, Joe, maybe he would have just had to be miserable to stay there. But they also ripped away key pieces of his success. If your staff looks good and they fire half of them, how are you going to continue
Well,
that
sure.
success?
If you have a administration, there's bad administrations and there's administrations who are actively working against the football program, and that's you can't. I don't know if you can overcome that. I had worked for a head coach with a bad administration, and he still is a masochist, and he fought for 10 years, and I left. Everybody left. Everybody left. Some of them came back because it's a black hole, but for the most part, everybody left. And he would get in a couple good coaches, and then they would leave. He would develop a couple good coaches. They would leave. 10 years, he went, 4-6, 5-5, 3-7, somewhere in that, bouncing around in that range. Never terrible. 0-10 the first year with nothing. Best player was a freshman. Then 1-9, then 3-7, and then bouncing that 4-6, 5-5. And 10 years in, he makes playoffs, has a winning record. Second year was COVID year, winning record, makes playoffs. But he was already informed that it was not his job anymore before coaching that COVID spring season.
Oh, no.
Kid you not. Broke through after 10 years, and they pretty much removed him to bring in somebody else who is already gone and tanked the program horribly.
That's what scares me, and that's kind of why I wanted y'all to answer this question, because there's so many teams out there that, Joe, you said it. People say stay away. That'll end your career. It's a career ender. And you can't be such a narcissist that you think, no, it's just because I haven't coached there yet. Like, that's ridiculous.
You got to do your research.
Yeah.
Why do people say that? Do they say it because of the kids? Then it's probably not. The kids are kids.
Right.
We've coached middle school. We've coached high school. We've coached different places. We've coached big school, small school, rich kid, poor kid, white kid, black kid. Kids are kids. You got a bad administration. If that's the reason you can't win there, that's hard.
Harder, yeah.
That's really hard.
So who is the problem administrator in a problem administration? It's like I've never had to deal with that.
I've been in big schools and small schools, and I've been in a college which had a relatively supportive administration, but not always. They were supportive the athletic director was supportive, and the admissions department was not as supportive, right? The admissions department's like, well, he can't spell. And you're like, yeah, but he runs a 4.4. Support the program. This is a junior college. Every
He runs 4.4.
everywhere is different. So if you're in a big county, if you're like, and I don't know what the structure is in Alabama, but like here, if you're in a big county, you're in Chesterfield County, you're in Henrico County, and there's 10 schools, 12 schools, you'll never meet the school board. You'll never meet the superintendent. So it can be your principal, it can be your athletic director. I've been in a school, this is my third time coaching in my third job. And I had one job where there were two schools. That was my first job. So I don't even know what was going on there. That was an unsupportive administration. That was a supportive administration because I think there might have been something going on between the principal and the head coach. So she was pretty supportive of the program. The other places that I've been have mostly been one school, one high school districts. And in that case, supportive administration, which is the one that I'm in right now, the principal, for the most part, I don't even know anybody on the school board. The principal, the school board, the superintendent, I don't know them. That's supportive on their part. We don't have to deal with. I know they actually worked with our principal like when I was a teacher, so I do know him, but I never see him. I never hear anybody talking about him. I see him at games, and he says, "Hey, coach, great job, good to see you." Whatever. That's the only interaction that we have really. That's supportive because the principal, the superintendent, and the school board should not be involved. The one that I see every day and talk to every day is the athletic director. That's a supportive administration. We got an athletic director who supports the program, and we got everybody else who lets the athletic director and the football coach run the program.
I guess that's why. I didn't mean
Good. No.
Go ahead. I thought you were done.
Well, no, I was just going to say when it's not the case, that's an unsupportive administration. When everybody wants to have their fingers in it, when they don't back the when they first of all of this comes back to the parents, because that's all that matters. When they bend over backwards to please the parents, screw the coach, and when you see the principal and you see the superintendent and you see the school board and they're involved all the time, that's a bad administration, and that's what I've found.
We're a part of a county school system, and I don't even know how many schools there are in the county. But there's big ones like in the city that's close to the interstate is a 5A school. They're horrible. Our chief rival is about 15 minutes away. There's other schools, I don't know, but we're a pretty outlier in the country. I don't guess the school board ever comes around our campus at all. Every coach that I coached with played and graduated from our school except for one, and he attended the rival school. I'm the outlier. I'm the only one that's a carpetbagger on the staff. My offensive coordinator is the athletic director, and my head coach is married to the principal.
Perfect. Well, maybe, I don't know. Does he do the dishes and stuff? Yeah, because like that
works out good.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's a job you can come into and be like, well, I expect the administration is going to be supportive in this, because like if the principal does the things that I've seen bad principals do, he won't be home. So, I mean, like, do your research. Like, honestly, you should, and like Daniel, if you're looking for head jobs, you should never, ever, ever take a head job where you don't call the guy that you're replacing. I mean, or people who left. Like, it's one thing if the guy that was the head coach now becomes the athletic director. That was the job that I took at Amelia. He's also a friend of mine. I knew everything about the program. I've been in the program for 3 years. I didn't need to call anybody except for him, and I was already interviewing with him, so it's fine. But like, I would never take a job without talking to. I want to talk, especially if I'm coming into a program I don't know. I want to talk to coaches. I want to talk to the previous head coach. I want to talk to the head coach before him. I want to talk to staff, assistants. I want to talk to the assistants that are expected to be returning. Now, all of this probably happens after your last interview and they offer the job and you say, I need, give me, like, I wouldn't do all of this until I got offered the job. But I get offered the job, I'm getting on the phone and I'm calling all these guys. Now, I might do some, if I know people, obviously, beforehand. But once you get offered the job, it's like, all right, now is the time for me to do my final due diligence, which is, why aren't you there anymore? And you have to ask those kind of questions. Just like if you ever hire somebody into a job position, you need to ask, why? Where was your previous job? Why don't you work there anymore?
Right.
And if they tell you that their boss was a jerk, you're probably going to be a jerk too. So, like, if the previous coach says, I just couldn't get along with the head coach, with the principal, you probably can't either, because you're both football guys.
That's a good one.
I would tell you this: if my head coach that I have now retires, and I kind of expect him to, his son is a junior this year, and his oldest is playing quarterback at West Alabama. This is his youngest. They're both been in teaching and administration for years. I kind of expect both of them to retire relatively soon. The situation that I just described to you with all the guys that are from the community, Daniel, if you stepped into something like that and they hired you from outside, I would be very wary of taking a position like that as an outsider. And now,
Yep.
If you walked into something like that and it was a bunch of new guys that were all coming from different places and you could rally them to support you, but if you walked in as a new head coach hired from outside into the position that I'm in, the coach that I'm in, that would be a bad situation, or could turn bad.
Yeah.
Trying to replace the legend, right? Like,
Well, but there's also the question, if you were coming into that situation, you would want to know who else is applying. So, let's say that 3 of the guys that are on that staff all applied for that head job and they didn't get it. They ain't going to like you. Yeah. And your best case scenario is they all leave, in which case everybody that stays is mad at you because their friend left. And your worst case scenario is they all stay and aren't. I mean, your best case scenario is they all stay and they're professionals, but that's tough. That's highly unlikely, honestly. It's
this coach that I have is not the one that won the championships in the mid-teens.
Yeah.
That coach took another job and moved on. But he was a product of that community too. So, that's the things you got to look at. What are you stepping into? If you're stepping into a hornet's nest, and you just got to trust your gut.
Yeah.
You got to trust your gut.
I'll
never be a head coach.
It's almost never the kids. It's almost never the kids. I mean, even if the cupboard's bare, if the head coach left because the cupboard's bare, fine. Like, good. There's no expectations this year. I got people who know what winning is like, but everybody knows that we're in a rebuild. Like, great. All right, let me do this. The kids are never the problem. The kids were never I taught for 12 years. The kids weren't the problem. It was daggone adults.
It's
always the adults. Adults ruin everything.
Well, guys, we blew that hour out of the water. We're pushing 1:30 now, so we will
gotta get out of here.
We'll start closing out. We checked all the boxes. We'll start getting out of here. Coach, before we check out and pay all the bills and do the outros here, man, I just want to tell you we appreciate you jumping on. Joe is always excited to hear from guys who are members of JDFB. So I got to ask, what have you gotten out of JDFB as a client, as someone who's been using it for at least 1 year? What have you taken out of that system?
It has made me completely understand defense at least well enough that I could run a defense at the level I'm at right now. I would feel very confident calling our defense completely using what I've learned from JDFB. And I'm like Joe, we ran the 3-3 like the Georgia military when I started running it back in 2014, but I'm now coaching the way you coach the defensive linemen and the linebackers, and we're squeezing blocks. We're not ripping into the gap. And I understand force and alley. And that was really, and how it ties into coverage and how that affects coverage, how coverage affects the run fits. And it's a complete defensive system. You might can buy one somewhere else, but I haven't seen it. You probably would pay a lot more money than and it's a complete defensive system. And I love it because I had the same thing that you say, the 3-3 and the 4-2 of what I've run, they're the same damn thing. the way I run them. It just depends on the personnel. You put how many guys you put with their hand on the ground, right? But they're all the same.
Just numbers. Yeah.
Fitting open doors and open windows.
The first time I think you look at two of Joe's systems side by side, 3-4, 4-2-5, or 3-3 stack, 4-2, whatever, you quickly realize we're just building fronts. Everybody's just building fronts. That's it. We're all getting back to over or under one way or another. Even, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how else you want to say it. That's what we're doing. We're all getting to over front one way or another, and the numbers don't matter. So
yep.
I appreciate it, Coach. Joe, let's go ahead and pay the bills. We'll get out of here, man.
Yeah. Again, check out joedanielfootball.com/system. We have a guide on creating your ultimate defensive coaching system, defensive football coaching system. It's going to go over exactly what goes into a defensive football system. It's going to talk about, what is a system, what goes into a system. It's going to talk about how you install that system and how you get the buy-in from your players for it. It's going to talk about the 5 mistakes that you must avoid if you want to be a successful program, especially if you want to be successful, and overachieve in that first year and all the planning that goes into it. So download that free guide by going to joedanielfootball.com/system.
Awesome. What cells are opening or closing right now? I know it's Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, right at this moment, we have Football Coaching 101 that is open. You can go to joedanielfootball.com/FBC. That, letter F, letter B, letter C, 101, no spaces, no dashes, anything like that, to get access to that. That is our kind of coaching education. It is the Football Coach U. It has 3 levels: Football Coaching 101 for coaches who are brand new to the game, or like honestly, a lot of coaches who've got 5-10 years. Well, I get coaches who've been coaching for 40 years and like, man, that thing just reminded me of things that I forget, going back to the basics sometimes. And then level 2 is what I would want any coach who's coached for a year, but I guarantee you most coaches 5-10 years in don't know yet. It's all about the intricacies and the design of plays, and playbooks and systems and all that sort of stuff. And then level 3 is the Coordinator Masterclass. And if you purchase level 3, you get all 3 levels. The Coordinator Masterclass is for coaches that already start playing calling plays. It's how to design your call sheets, how to plan your call sheets, offensive and defense, how to, get from the plan practices, as the coordinator, all the things you have to do: game plan, practice plan, manage the game on Friday night, all of those things. That's the Coordinator Masterclass. So that is available. If you're listening to this right now, it's going to be available through Cyber Monday at joedanielfootball.com/FBC101.
Awesome. Social media, I am on Twitter at Coach Chambo OK. You can reach out at chamberlainfootballconsulting@gmail.com. I also have a website by the same thing, chamberlainfootballconsulting.com, and a Patreon, patreon.com/ChamberlainFootballConsulting. It's a place to go to learn some small things about being a football coach. If you're a new coach, or you got players you're trying to teach up or whatever, I'm sure there's a tier there for you. Coach Ransom, we'll let you go. I should let you go first. I'm so sorry. If someone wanted to reach out to you and just talk a little football, or maybe ask how to get out of trouble, whatever it is they're trying to do, how could they reach out to you?
Well, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook a little bit, Jim Ransom. I have a Twitter account, but I'm sort of anonymous there because I get involved in politics a little bit too much. But I probably am going to change that and just enjoy the coaching. So it's JJR3 Esquire.
There we go.
So, yeah, that's, you can
reach out to one of those.
social media that way.
Awesome. Yep. I appreciate it. Joe is.
Whenever you reach out to Daniel, he can find me.
There we go. I'll send you over. Joe is at Football Info on Twitter /X, and then on Facebook and TikTok and all the other things. What you have to remind me what it is, Joe? See, I was going to run away
TikTok is
with
at Football Info.
Okay.
TikTok, no, sorry. Twitter is at Football Info. This is how much I mess with. At Football Info on Twitter. Everything else is Joe Daniel Football, at Joe Daniel Football on TikTok, at Joe Daniel Football on Instagram, at Joe Daniel Football, or joedanielfootball.com/YouTube, facebook.com/Joe Daniel Football, Joe at joedanielfootball.com.
The podcast is on Twitter /X at the FBCP. If this is your first time listening to the Football Coaching Podcast, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can find us on your favorite podcatcher, Spotify and Apple Podcast are the big two. If you've been listening for a while, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. We really want to spread the word. We want to help more coaches. If you're getting anything out of this, other people will too, but they won't know until you give us the 5-star review. Coach Ransom, once again, thank you so much for jumping on with us tonight. I know it was a long show. I hope we didn't, push too long here, but it was a good topic, and you had a lot of input, and, man, we were super glad to get that. So we appreciate you being on.
I really appreciate you having me. I enjoyed it.
Wonderful. We'll have you on anytime, man. Just reach out when you're ready to come back and talk some ball. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Football Coaching Podcast. Remember, coach simple, play fast, win.